Hi, I'm Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that focuses on musicians, authors, and interesting people. We like to say we're making a difference one artist at a time. So sit back, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. Author Time is back on the podcast, and I'm very excited to have today's guest on it. And especially, you're going to like it too, if you're a fan of sword and sorcery and Dungeons and Dragons and The Hobbit and Game of Thrones and are partial to the fantasy adventure tales. You're going to love today's guest. He's an author of the epic fantasy book series called the Warminster series. Will you please welcome JV Hilliard. Joe, welcome aboard. How you doing, man?
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
I have to ask you, when did your love affair with this genre begin?
You know, it really came in two places. The first was I had when I was in fourth grade, my English teacher at the time went out on a medical sabbatical, and we were about a month away from the end of the year. And somehow our permanent sub got permission from the principal to read us The Hobbit.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah, so we got The Hobbit and part of Lord of the Rings before it was done. And it really opened my eyes to the genre. And I went home and I asked my uncle, and I have a little bit of a strange story here, so follow me through this.
No problem.
My uncle's a writer, and part of that is because he was paralyzed in the Vietnam War. My mother was his nurse, and he was like a second father to me. I grew up in his bedroom and idolized him in many respects. And he was very limited in what he could do. But one of the things he could do was write, which is why I've kind of followed in his footsteps. And then, ultimately, he helped me understand a little bit more about The Hobbit. So that Christmas, I got my first version of The Hobbit, and he bought me my first Dungeons and Dragons box set.
Oh, I love it.
And so I started playing it. Yeah. And so that was a form of escapism from his paralysis. He was my first dungeon master. But it also really, from that point on, it was like rocket shot. I loved fantasy adventure and everything about fantasy sci-fi you could find.
Yeah, I was wrapped up in it too. Back in the early 80s, once we got the toddlers to sleep, my late wife, a couple of neighbors, and I would stay up to the wee hours of the morning playing Dungeons and Dragons.
There you go. I'll admit my nerddom. I still do. My friends from high school, we've been playing. We're now around the country, and I think we are where you once were. And with family and professions and obligations and things, it's hard. We give ourselves 6 to 10, and everybody just dials in, and we do it online. And we still
nice!
play,
That's cool. That's cool to do it online.
Yeah,
it's amazing how things have transitioned. Because I remember it used to be, pieces of graph paper and doing that whole thing. I think it got some.
I still have some of it.
Yeah, I think it got a lot of
old maps. Right, you're drawing when the DM's describing it to you.
Exactly, and I think it got a little bit of resurgence thanks to Big Bang Theory.
Well, that, and I think that really, as goofy as this is going to sound, the silver lining in it was really COVID. People were shut down for a while. This is a form of escapism for many. And I saw that it was the rise of Critical Role and all of these like YouTube and Twitch and other kind of shows where they were professional actors and actresses role-playing in a D&D style, and it kind of repopularized the game. And of course, it doesn't hurt when you've got movies coming out and people that are the new D&D movie just released this past weekend. I know Joe Manganiello's been pushing for a Dragonlance series and things like that. So we'll see where that goes. And I think it continues to kind of move the genre forward in that respect.
This was the question I was going to ask you later as far as, have you seen an uptick in your sales thanks to Dungeons & Dragons out or among things?
I don't know. It's only been a couple of days, so we'll see. The novels and the Warminster series in particular, it's been a memorialization of 20 years of playing the game, right? I took the best characters and the best villains with the best plots and stitched them all together to kind of create this 4-book series. And I see when I get ticks up in sales, it's typically because either, I'm on a show like this, or I'm at a convention somewhere, and I'm at a book signing, and people will have a chance to see me and learn a little bit more about the history. And you'd be surprised how many people will buy a book just because they like an author or they like an author's story, without knowing much about it. You can only tell them so much in a blurb, and there are spoiler alerts all through blogs and things like that. But, I try to be as available to my readership as possible, and, answer their questions and even accept some of their advice from time to time.
Yeah, I got a quick question for you. Growing up and doing your D&D and everything like that, what are the name of some of your characters?
So my first character ever was Fleric, and he was named after
Rick Flair?
No. He was a halfling thief back when thieves were works character classes. Now I under the new rules they're rogues.
Yeah.
But he was my first, and then the one that really is that I've set apart inside the novels is Sir Ritter of Vulcaneer.
Hmm.
And he was my most recent PC. I do a lot of DMing, so I don't play a lot. And when I do play, I try to have the most crazy character that I can. And in Ritter's case, he's sort of like Dritz Duarden from the Dark Elf series meets Aragorn. And I smashed them together and created this half-elven ranger that has, Aragorn's heart and Dritz's courage, and put them together and threw a tangled love story around him with the fate of the realm hanging in the balance. So it was, some of it really came from that adventure that he went through. Others came from other adventures that I DM'd, and then some of them were just brand new, just ideas that I've had for a while that I baked into the the Fleric was my first, and Ritter was my most recent, and those are kind of my favorite too.
Awesome. I remember I had Prince Valkyrie was mine, and my wife had Lady Danai was hers. I'll never forget those. Still remember those names.
Good name.
Yeah. Awesome.
We can never go wrong with Valkyrie, but Danai's a pretty good name.
Yeah. Let me see here. Let's talk about the Warminster series. The first book was this one right here, the one I got right here, which is in your background right there. And this all follows from the Element of Time series at Altered Reality magazine. This was all pretty much a product of the COVID breakdown, right? Or as far as the lockdown and everything like that. Yeah.
So what really happened was, I've always wanted to write a book, but life takes over, and my profession took over, and I really do a lot of writing for my what was at that time my day job. And when COVID happened, my day job shut down for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So I had nothing to do. And my wife looked at me and she's like, you're not going to sit around. I would drive her nuts sitting around with all my like pent up energy. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to knock this off my bucket list. And I wrote what I thought was going to be a standalone novel. And I shared it with an associate professor friend of mine who took it and said, you really got something here. It needs some pacing. You need a little better dialogue. You need to see an editor. So when I saw an editor, he sent it on to a publisher who publishes this. And she said, look, I'll publish this, but I want to see 3 books. And then 3 books became 4. And then the offshoot of the Warminster series was what I was doing with Altered Reality, which is the Element of Time series. It's all set within the realm of Warminster, to use a D&D term like Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms. Instead of being Middle Earth for Tolkien, it's the realm of Warminster for me. So all of these things happen within that dynamic there, and that's really where that kind of came from.
Very good. Book 1 came out in 2021, December 2021. Can you give us a quick, maybe 30 to a minute synopsis of Book 1, what people are going to get involved with when they actually start reading this particular one? The Last Keepers.
Yeah, sure. They're going to read a kind of traditional trope between a chosen one and a false prophet. And the main character is a character named Damus Alaric, who is a young man who's graduating from the Cathedral of the Watchful Eye, which is a cathedral of prophets and seers. And they come together to learn how to take the gifts that have been given to them by their god, the Ancient of Knowledge, this ancient Erud, and use them to help the kings and queens of the realm manage things well. And Damus continues to have these prophetic dreams about a fallen keeper coming back to challenge the cathedral. And that's really where the book starts. And I punch in the face with it right in the prologue in chapter 1, and get that rolling. And so if you like that kind of struggle, it's a lot of magic, a lot of battles, and of course, I do a lot of world building in the first novel to kind of get you into the realm and, get you familiar with where you are.
And then that takes you into book number 2, which looks like this. This one right here is Vorden's
right.
Lair. This is book 2. This came out in 2022. Is that correct?
Yeah, it came out in September of last year. Okay. The Vorden's Lair is a follow-up. It's really, Damus and his not just coming of age story, but also his maturation as a, kind of an adventurer. And he's accepting the fact that he's on this pace to battle the Grey Taurus, the Mad, the evil fallen keeper that's coming back to try to I don't want to say destroy the realm, but throw the realm into chaos and take his revenge. And it's really a follow up as part of that. It gets you into there. It's My Empire Strikes Back, and there's action in there. The characters get a chance to develop a little bit, and there's I think that. It's a nice setup for, as we come crashing into the last 2, as everyone kind of sees at the I don't know any spoiler alerts, but as Damus starts to formulate what the Great Taurus's plot is, it's now set, and it's like, how do we stop it? How do we foil this guy before everything goes off the rails? And that's what book 3 and 4 bring you into.
And I understand book 3 is coming out next week. Trillius's Gambit is coming out next week. Can you tell us what people can expect when the book comes out on, was it the 15th?
It is. And the book is going to be a follow-up. It's almost like a 2-part ending to the saga. And this is going to set Damus on a path where he's now kind of got the upper hand on Great Taurus the Mad, and he's setting up for the final battle. And Great Taurus pulls out all the stops and does something that I hope the readers will not expect that he'll do to give him a pivot on the chessboard and get back in the game. And then, the final novel will come out, Echoes of Ghostwood will come out in October of 2023. So we're a few months away from that.
Have you given any thought as to if this were to wind up becoming a movie or a movie franchise, who would play what roles?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. My wife and her friends oftentimes will pick the hottest actors, and of course, they're the ones that are going to play even if they don't fit the right the characters and stuff. I honestly, I think one of the big bad evil guys is a guy named Dragach von Lormark, and he's sort of Ritter Vulcanier's, his enemy. And von Lormark to me is like Clancy Brown. He played Kurgan in The Highlander, a big, tall, deep voice, double-bladed sword kind of thing, where he's going to go in and fight. And I think Clancy would make a great von Lormark. I think in terms of other actors and actresses, they kind of fade in and they fade out. I get a lot of different ideas for people and things like that, but that's a question that unfortunately my wife has spent much more time investing.
I figured as much as far as the flowing hair and everything.
Oh yeah, which clearly I don't have flowing hair, and I'm not. I don't look, because it's like good answer to everything is Chris Hemsworth, Liam Hemsworth, and I'm like, yeah, they're a little bit they're outside of my price range, I think.
Well, with Chris Pine doing the latest thing, maybe he could just transition from there,
It's a good fit. I mean, although I think he's one of those A-listers. I'm not sure my stuff rises to that level, but in that same vein, what's interesting is I've licensed my intellectual property from the series to a video game company. Then that they're making an augmented reality game that comes out in 2024, and then the virtual reality game of that will come out in 2025. For that, we've got voiceover actor opportunities. And I think those might present some pretty cool opportunities for folks that either have like a fantasy or a sci-fi voice that people might be able to recognize. That becomes a little bit more affordable and realistic than my wife's Hemsworth dreams.
Well, very good. I really like that. Now, this, of course, is the fantasy world. This is total departure from what you do on your normal 9-to-5 job, right? What do you do for a living?
Absolutely. I'm a DC lobbyist. I do defense and technology lobbying. So when I used the term escapism before, it's absolutely true. Like my life is full of realism. And it's not all good. For me, this is something that's clean. It pulls me away. If you asked anybody in DC and they knew that I was writing something, they would think it would be historical, some sort of like maybe historical fiction at its best. At best, I should say. But if you told them I was a fantasy adventure author, they'd fall off their seats. It's just not. This is such a giant step away from what I do day to day that it makes it. I think it surprises some people when they learn. But for me, it's my way of channeling my creativity away from the DC Beltway stuff that I've got to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
That's good. Escapism is very important, especially after COVID. My goodness, COVID was the ultimate suck-in of everything that we had to do. And it's nice to see that you took the time to actually work on this, because so many of us sat on our laurels during, if I had the free time, I'd do this, and then we found out in 2020 that we didn't do anything. We just sat and watched
I'll tell you what, I would be
Netflix.
scratching the walls if I wasn't doing something. So this was a really nice outlet. It was the silver lining in a very dark cloud, right? So like for me, it was something that I knew I always wanted to do. And now I'm turning it into my career. Like I'm moving away from doing the stuff I do professionally. And I've got enough momentum and maybe in about a year or so, I'll be able to do this full time and, make the back nine of my career in my authorship.
Very good. How does your wife support this whole project? She's a big fan of
Oh
it?
my gosh. She loves it. Now it's funny because she's not much of a reader. She likes to listen to novels and she's a big movie buff.
Uh,
So from that perspective, I'm a few steps before her real, where she would be screaming if it was like the movie idea that we talked about a little bit earlier, that would be something that she would be into, but for this, she's been incredibly supportive. At the time she was working two jobs, which allowed me to kind of stay at home and do this and find a publisher and do all the things you need to do. And, when you start down this path, you can do it as an art form and just put a book out there and hope people read it.
mm-hmm.
But in my business, this is a science. Like this was my next entrepreneurial endeavor. And so I created a business around that. And, as a business owner where I own several businesses, this is one where, I am the brand and my books are my product.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just tried to ramp that up as best I can and really sort of focus on, sales and marketing and building a social media following and all the kind of things that I see other successful authors doing. And, being inspired by their path to success, I've tried to borrow against that and build in my own kind of way. And I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And when I think she finds her fun is she'll go to libraries or she'll set up, book signings for me. And she has a great time doing that stuff.
Awesome. Very good. So
she's like the mayor, she could walk around and make fun, friends with everybody, and it's easy, then all of a sudden someone shows up at the table and says, I talked to your wife. I was like, no kidding. She talks to everybody.
Yeah, it's like my late wife was my manager. I mean, she was the one that would they wouldn't call me to see if I had an opening. They would call her and say, you've got an interview on such and such a date. You need to be here at this particular time. Don't be late.
Headquarters, right? Yeah, I feel you. I know.
Absolutely. Now, we were talking about your books. Let's go ahead and find out where we can purchase these great books. What's the best avenue? Some of your socials.
Yeah, so you could find my books pretty ubiquitously. If you're an Amazon shopper, you could find it there on Amazon. If you want to go to my publisher, you can go to dragonmoonpress.com. And there are about 20 different distribution channels like Apple or Barnes and Noble or any of the other places where you would either buy your paperbacks or get your ebooks. And then audiobooks are located on just about as many distribution channels as well.
Oh,
yeah. So if you have Audible or you use Apple for that stuff or Kobo, right, or you download it, you get the audiobooks as well there. My socials are it's really easy to find me. It's my name. It's at JV Hilliard Books. If you're looking for me on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok. If you're looking for me on Facebook and Discord, you can find me at just JV Hilliard.
Very good. I will include all those links down here in the show notes so everyone has an opportunity to get these books and to escape into the realm of the Warminster series. Before we go, closing thoughts, any last things people should know about you and the series?
Yeah, this is the first of the series. After the series is over, we're going to do a couple of origin stories about some of the more popular characters. So if you're a fan of In Canis Druwaith, the assassin in the stories, or you like Blue Connie, sort of like the Hobbit or halfling character that's has got a little like weightlifting problem and is a barbarian berserker on steroids. I think people like him. You'll be able to read some of those stories in novella form instead of sort of the epic fantasy stuff that I write. And then series 2 is going to come out after that. So
awesome.
We'll see where that goes. That's a couple of years away, but for right now, that's what I've got, planned. Plus the video game next year should we continue to get a little busier.
This is really cool. JV Hilliard, my guest today. He is the author of the Warminster series. Make sure you go ahead and get yourself a couple hundred copies of this book, okay? And by all means, check the links that I have included in the show notes to get yourself a book. Man, thanks for Joe. Thanks for being on here, man. I really appreciate that.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you very much for your time and the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for listening to this episode of Someone You Should Know. Now, if you're an aspiring musician or an established musician that's looking for a little exposure, I invite you to drop us a line at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. That's someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to tell a friend about the Someone You Should Know podcast. I thank you for tuning in this time, and I invite you to check us out next time on the Someone You Should Know podcast, because you never know who's going to show up. Until next time, remember, God loves you, and so do I.